This video was initially just going to be about the response, which has now been unlisted. Boy, things change really quickly in this situation. But it's also important to talk about and take into consideration that Omnia has apologized since I initially wrote this video, and to take into consideration what that apology says. Although it doesn't make the previous videos invalid and isn't my apology to accept either, it does potentially offer more of an understanding as to the angle that the videos were made from. So let's start this video by going over the apology. I also want to state that Hopeless Peaches, who is someone that was spoken about by Omnia, has accepted this apology. As you can see here, Omnia has unlisted 2 previous videos.
Hello everyone, I just wanted to
Good that there's credit for the art inspiration today.
Come on here to make a brief video to let you know that I hear you and that I'm sorry. After stepping back and reflecting on my last 2 videos, I recognize that I missed the mark on more than a couple things. Firstly, I want to apologize for my poor wording surrounding the topic of trauma and drama.
This is kind of something that I talk about later in the video, but obviously she's apologized for it, so maybe it's not as valid of a point as it was. I was writing the video initially, but you'll see.
Vague language and subpar phrasing, I ended up creating misunderstandings rather than explaining myself properly and effectively. I wanted to emphasize that I don't believe anyone's trauma is invalid.
Yeah, because it seemed like the response video and the video that she was referring to seemed that they didn't entirely line up.
Of when it came about, where it stems from, or what caused it. I apologize for using terms such as lukewarm to describe a topic as serious as this, and I'm sorry that I oversimplified this deeply complex and nuanced topic. I never wanted what I said to come off as though anyone's trauma didn't count or was being reduced, minimized, trivialized, or otherwise invalidated. My previous clarification videos seem to have resulted in further invalidation, and although that wasn't my intention,
so that video is the one that we're going to be talking about after this.
I realized I didn't do the greatest job at communicating that.
They're right. They didn't do the greatest job of communicating.
Again, I apologize for the misunderstandings my inability to communicate effectively have caused. The last thing I wanted was to hurt my viewers because of my phrasing, and for that, I sincerely apologize. I will do my best to be more careful of this in the future. Secondly, I wanted to address the art theft.
Obviously, everyone who's watching this video that I'm talking about, and also this video, is a viewer, but when I think of viewer, I think of like subscriber and avid watcher, whereas people who were potentially offended by the video, for example, didn't necessarily have to be a viewer, you know, but I get what they're saying.
And tracing claims. I drew this image in my video discussing trauma and drama. I used this artwork by Magikarp as my reference, and for the color palette, I used this
It's true.
reference. I have recently been accused of tracing and plagiarizing this work from Magikarp.
I don't know why this is really in here, because this is like rehashing the previous video. I know that Omnia unlisted them, but Omnia did actually state in the comments that here's the link to both of them, so they want to be transparent.
Clarify that I did not do that. I did not trace Magikarp's artwork, but rather I referenced it and drew it on my own, as is evident by this speed paint. My mistake was not crediting Magikarp in the description of my video immediately after I posted it. I should have asked permission to reference Magikarp's work for my video.
Yeah, that as well, but also like the initial Twitter post, Magikarp is nowhere to be mentioned.
Simply using it without her consent. However, when I was made aware that I had forgotten to add credit for the reference, I quickly fixed my mistake and reached out to Magikarp privately in order to apologize directly. She was very considerate.
That's a thing as well, yes.
And forgiving, and we came to a mutual understanding about what she will or will not tolerate in relation to referencing her art. I will be sure to be more careful of this in the future, ask permission before heavily referencing another artist's artwork, and ensure that I properly credit my art references moving forward. Lastly, I apologize for disappointing members of my community.
They basically go on to say that they're sorry. There'll be a link in the description to it. Of course, I've gone over the majority of it, but if you want to go there and send Omnia support if you're happy with the apology or whatever, I wouldn't advise at all going and sending Omnia hate, or sending anyone hate, for example. If you want to talk about the videos that I'm talking about in this video, then keep that to my comment section and we can have a hopefully thoughtful discussion about the contents, but there's no point in going and hating on someone else just because of what I presented. Before we go on to the video that I wrote, I just want to share a couple of things. the like to dislike ratio for this video is pretty decent, and 2, that Omnia has been bleeding subscribers, and I feel like this could in part be what inspired the apology. I don't know how sincere it is. I'm not just trying to be pessimistic. I know that Omnia themselves has been in controversy previous, and I feel like if there was anything to be learned, it would have been in one of those situations. Although I feel like this is probably different to those situations, so there's different lessons that would be or could be learned, for example. But I hope that Omnia continues to move forward and learn from their mistakes. That's all anyone can hope for. Omnia's Twitter is also currently private. Now, with all that in mind, let's go on to the video I wrote. Who would have thought I'd be making a trilogy? In my previous video, I spoke about the alleged art theft and the apology for it that was made. And by apology, I don't mean the one I just played, I mean the Twitter thread. And a little bit about Kai. But what was heavily referenced by myself was that they were going to make a response video. Before we go forward, I just want to state that Omnia stated in this video that there would be another response. But because of the apology, I assume that that therefore isn't going forward. As was seen from my previous video, the response that they made, which is the one talking about, the Addressing Hopeless Peaches accusations video, wasn't online when I recorded the video. But between editing my last video and releasing it, the response was released, which is interesting considering between me initially writing this and recording this, an apology was released. I decided that I would make this video a third part rather than scrapping the previous video and essentially remaking it, because I felt that everything on my end in the previous video was explained in a way that showed that I wasn't ignoring the response, that it simply didn't exist. But if you pulled up the upload times, you would see that my video was uploaded after Omnia's response. Although when I show something in the previous video, you could see that the response was not uploaded at that time. Anyway, let's talk about the video entitled Addressing Hopeless Peaches Accusations, which to start off with is a bit of a strange title if you ask me. I understand that people often put people's names in titles like I have for this video and the 2 previous ones, for example, but Peaches wasn't the only one who was saying these things, and Omnia has a not too pleasant past with Peaches, which makes it all the more strange. Omnia has gone on to say that Peaches was put in the title because they were the largest creator that had called Omnia out for their previous video, and that was the thought process behind that, which makes sense. Omnia starts the video by addressing the art theft allegation, showing that they didn't trace the art like some people had claimed, by showing a speed paint of it, which they also showed in the apology. They then go on to talk about Peaches mentioning copying the colours and character design, of which they go on to say that it's impossible to do if you're drawing the same pre-existing character, which makes some sense and has also been addressed in the apology that I just showed. Outside of the fact that they mentioned that they want to do it in their own style. I'm no artist, but surely if you have your own style, it wouldn't look like an exact copy of another person's work. It would be your own style, although they say that they heavily referenced it. Who knows, maybe I'm wrong about that, but it seems like quote unquote your own style wouldn't be so similar or close to identical as another artist. There's many different ways to draw that character, any character for that matter. A lot of people do their own interpretations of characters, yet magically you can distinguish them from one another. They do also correctly state that they didn't use the same color palette, which they also mentioned in the apology that I showed earlier in the video. Omnia goes on to share messages between themselves and Meg, whom it was alleged that they copied. Everything seems to be sorted out, which is good. I still don't know why it took Omnia 2 weeks, but still. They go on to mention that everything was resolved privately with Meg a few days before Peach's video came out, implying that Peaches should have somehow known. It is valid that Omnia had apologized via a Twitter thread by the time Peach's video was out, but that doesn't mean someone can't express an opinion about a matter, like I am in this video. Peaches doesn't mention the Twitter thread in their video, but also talks about how there's no credit in the description of the video. Two things which have changed since Peaches' video came out. There is no way of knowing if Peaches knew the thread existed or if it did when she made her video. If she ignored the apology thread, then I admit that that's not good. There's bits in this section that I didn't mention in my first video, so I'm just going to try and keep it relevant to the points I made. OMNIA'S video will of course be linked in the description below. I would also like to make it clear that I had not seen Peaches' video before I made my first video on the subject. OMNIA goes on to talk about a point that I made, that Peaches also made, about the hypocrisy surrounding their comments about trauma and drama, then talking about something they themselves covered. OMNIA offers quote-unquote context behind how Peaches presented that specific situation. But I've seen OMNIA's original video without seeing Peaches and came to the same conclusion. The section is honestly a bit confusing. My interpretation is that OMNIA is saying that although some videos about the Creepshow art/Emily Artful situation were treated with care, others unfortunately weren't, despite both sides gaining monetarily. I'm sorry that Emily Artful didn't have enough time to give every good video about the subject her blessing while she was going through a traumatic situation. If I were to hypothetically ask Emily if my series of videos was okay, does her not responding automatically mean it's bad? No. Also, what about all the videos that OMNIA made that were about the lolcow situation? I'm glad that Emily told OMNIA that their series was okay. But it also seems like they're trying to morally grandstand, like their series of videos is apparently not as harmful as others despite talking about the same subject. I do agree that some people likely poked fun at the situation and could have done some harm, which isn't fair, but presenting it like you're the only one who was morally right when presenting the information just doesn't sit right with me. Somehow it's presented like the community handled it poorly, but OMNIA'S series is something everyone should go watch because Emily gave it the all clear, which is a weak argument. This is the last section I want to go over in the video, and maybe the strongest argument in OMNIA'S video, kind of. OMNIA goes on to talk about how their comments were perceived when talking about what constitutes drama and trauma. And I know I said this section is somewhat strong. It does have its flaws in regards to the initial video. OMNIA goes on to talk about medical diagnosis and what counts as trauma in regards to the DSM-5. This is where it kind of makes sense. It's explained the angle that it's coming from, and while it is potentially self-described by OMNIA as word vomit, I understand it. But I do have an issue. What they're describing is the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. PTSD is after the fact, hence the term post-traumatic stress disorder. If you're living through trauma, it's possible that you don't have PTSD because enough time hasn't passed for it to haunt you, for example. There's a difference between PTSD versus drama and trauma versus drama. OMNIA also briefly explained that their stance was misinterpreted in the initial video. Also, as good as the DSM-5 article is and was used as a reference point in the response video, it is not mentioned anywhere in the first video. What is shown though is dictionary definitions of what trauma and drama are, which therefore means it would make sense for people to assume that what OMNIA said outside of dictionary definitions was also word vomit, which is also something that OMNIA addressed in their apology video. It kind of fits under the same umbrella as being misconstrued as what they were saying, I guess. Misinterpreted, sorry. Also, although Peach's video isn't without its flaws, same with any video, we all do our best, but I'm sure that this video you're watching right now has some too. It's a bit strange for someone to talk about a video and then have a comment that in this case Peaches was meant to have seen according to OMNIA that seems to point something out that then leads to OMNIA clarifying their point, although OMNIA did concede that maybe Peaches hadn't seen the comment. For example, I downloaded the video to watch offline. I can't even see the comments. I'm just taking it at face value like people do, for example with this video. It's no one's fault that you didn't clarify in your video what you meant. and that someone was meant to look in the comments to find that clarification. Although you did semi-clarify it in the apology, so that's good. I assume that this will be the last video in this situation, because an apology has been made. Thanks so much for the support recently, and thanks for watching, and I shall see you soon for more content. Peace.